All right. Very special day on the podcast today. We have a guest who probably doesn't need an introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. He was a wildcard entrant into the 2001 Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, where he went on to win as a wildcard against Danny Wills in the final. That same year, he qualified for the championship tour with a historic run on the qualifying series. And the next 15 plus years were spent surfing alongside the best of the best during his tenure on the CT, including Kelly Slater, the late great Andy Irons, Joel Parkinson, Taj Burrow, Owen Wright, John Florence, Gabriel Medina, and many others. And despite the murderer's row of talent during his era, I mean, multiple eras, really, he racked up 22 CT wins, 11 top 5 finishes, and 3 goddamned world titles. After his retirement, he has continued to shine in the free surfing realms as well as the business world, essentially existing as the gold standard of what a successful post-competitive surf career looks like. Ladies and gentlemen, Mick Fanning is back on the lineup today. Mick, thank you so much for coming back. And how are you doing today?
Good, mate. Better after that intro.
Yeah. You can just clip that and it could just be like your mantra every morning, but you'd have to hear my voice would be the problem.
There we go. We'll get Joe Capel to put it in.
Right. So we are recording this a few days out from the start of the 2023 Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. Are you going to be at Bells? Are you already down there? Where are you at as we talk today?
I'm actually in Melbourne at the moment. Just had to fly down for a little bit of work. But I'm only going to be at Bells this year for 2 days. I'm just going to go down and just sort of do a couple little things for Rip Curl, and then I'm going to take the family home and spend only my second Easter since I was 15 at home with the family. So that's exciting. I think it's going to be fun.
That's very, very cool. And you mentioned you down there for work. We're obviously going to get into it in today's conversation. But, according to three-time world champion Gabriel Medina's Instagram, you, Gabe, and I think it was Mason Ho, just came back from a trip together. Can you tell us a little bit about it, where you were and what you're getting up to?
Can't tell you where we were, but we did a little search trip. And the three of us got to finally, all the stars aligned, and Mason and I got to get Gabe onto a trip, which is sort of very rare these days. But we had a great time. We were surfing by ourselves, and surf some waves I've never been to, and just really exciting just to have Gabe out of that contest world and just sort of hanging with us. And and Mason was in fine form as usual. He's just such a character, man. He's he brings all the good vibes every time.
Now, most people, when it comes to Gabe Medina, they digest him through his dominance on the championship tour, or arguably a curated version of what he gets up to on Instagram. But what is he like outside of the jersey in your experience?
I think, what people see, like when I essentially look at it when he's going into the competitors area, that's when he's going to work. So everyone works different, but away from all that, away from the cameras and everything, he's one of the nicest kids you'll ever meet. And that's what he is. He's just essentially a kid that just wants to have fun. He's always laughing. He's very engaging. He's not like one of those people you go on a trip with and like, oh, don't go in his room or don't disturb him or roll out the red carpet. He's just one of the crew, and just gets on along with it. And all he wants to do is just go and surf good waves. So and have a lot of fun while we do it. So he was awesome on the trip. Actually, we had some really good chats and had a really good time.
Now, do you think that he surfs differently outside of a jersey as well, or is it pretty similar or agnostic of the situation?
On this trip, he just seemed really free, which was amazing. I hadn't been around that sort of caliber of surfer for a little bit now, and I just remember in our first surf, just watching him. he was just going this way and that way and just moving so fast. I was like, wow, how do we even nearly keep up with this guy? He was, and just like in waves that you don't think anything's possible. He's doing huge like flips and huge spins, and I was like, I'm so glad I retired. But yeah, but also too, I saw a different side of his surfing. Um, he wasn't worried about, um, you know, connecting all the way to the beach. He wasn't trying to get every score out of every wave. He was really free and really enjoying his surfing.
Mm.
And yeah, it was really exciting and such an honor to witness.
It's interesting you note about, especially given the time of year it is, where you said, "I'm so glad I retired," because it pings off of a memory for me of reading a Sean Doherty article in Tracks, and this is maybe 20 years ago, probably right around then. And he did an article, and it was on you and Joel, and it was talking about the Bells event. I think you guys had gone mobile for the day, determining whether you're going to run. And he talked about how I think Sonny Garcia was the surfers rep, and some of the older guard were like, "We're not running here. It's like close out, like rip bowls." And Sean was like, you know, Joel got this right-hander at Joanna and like went ballistic. Mick got the one behind him, and then Dean just got drained across the entire sandbar. And it was a very like profound moment of changing of the guard. And I think they didn't end up running that day, but it was like Sean had kind of noted, this generation is really rattling the older one. I'm curious if you even kind of remember that experience from when you were younger, and if there's any parallels between that and kind of how you experience surfing around guys like Gabe today.
Um, I think I do remember the session. It was one of those ones where it was really fun for a free surf, but in a heat would have been pretty difficult.
Mm.
And Sonny was, he was, what he said went. It's like we're not messing with Sonny. And so, like, if he said go in and sit on the beach so we can't see any waves, it's like, okay, yes, sir. Um, but it's just, I think, the way I look at it is youth and excitement on those type of
Mm.
waves. Um, but yeah, like even the way that I feel like I'm getting older now, like I'm seeing waves and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do out there, or I'll probably do a couple of floaters or a couple of cutbacks, and then to go and see Gabe right next to me just go out and just do huge full rotation spins. It's like,
Mm.
oh God, it's but that's the evolution. That's the evolution of the sport, and I think that's the exciting part of it all is that we do hit peaks, and there are certain waves that we become accustomed to, and what we keep gravitating to. Where when you're young, you just want to surf everything. You just want to surf every minute of every day, and unfortunately, as you get older, your body can't do that.
Mm. Now, you are uniquely positioned to answer this question, maybe kind of singularly so as far as surfers in the modern era go, but you've experienced life really at the upper echelon of two distinct surfing dimensions. The first as a three-time world champion, taking on the titans of surfing in the live arena, and the second now as a marquee free surfer on Rip Curl's revered search program. Pioneering new wave locations, surfing essentially without confinement of clocks or competitors or judgment. So I'm genuinely curious as to how those two experiences are held inside you. They're wildly different, but does one hold more prestige in your heart of hearts than the other? Do you prefer one to the other? Could you envision having had a career of doing one without the other, I guess is my question too.
Um, yeah, look, it's a funny question. When you're a competitor, you think that the easy life is just becoming a free surfer. And there's this stigma around free surfing that they're not competitive, where they totally are.
Mm.
When you're a competitor on the tour, you get scored on every single wave. So you have that immediate feedback, and you're like, all right, I'm doing good, I'm not doing good. But I really enjoyed that part of it. Once you step into the free surfing world, it's totally different in the sense that you've got to go out there and try and do your best surfing in. You still got a certain amount of time because swells only last, or really good sessions only last a few hours here and there. So you got to try and get as many waves you can. But also too, you got to change up all your repertoire. You got to change up different looks and this and that. And it's really cool to, like, the best free surfers in the world. They have a list of moves that they want to go through, and what they want to achieve, and you've got to keep thinking the whole time, do I, just to make it look different for the film, so it's not like the exact same wave every time. Where
Right.
where for people, you go to trestles and you have a certain wave, you surf the wave, and it might change from turn to turn depending on the wave, but essentially you surf it the same each time. But you've got to try and figure out new ways to add new scores. So it's pretty much the similar, but yeah, you're just not getting that instant feedback. You have to sit on your hands and wait, and go through all those online blogs and see if people actually really like your surfing.
Do you do that? Do you read the comments about yourself?
No, I don't. It's funny. It's a different world. It's definitely a different world. But those guys free surfers work harder, if not harder, than the tour, because they've got to go and find their own waves. They've got to go and find the filmers and put it all together, during a perfect window. So.
Yeah, I've heard similar things from CT surfers that have then evolved into free surfers, or have just had to out of survival because they fell off tour or whatever. And one of the consistent comments was, they're like, free surfing, it seems nice on as far as the profession goes, from the outside looking in. He goes, but these people would say, but at least with the tour, there is kind of a structure to my year. And so I can say, okay, J-Bay's coming up, I'm going to go find a right-hander, go to surf. And without that structure, they're kind of like, well, we got to really, it's too many options, and we have to kind of figure it out and put something around it. And for someone like yourself that was on tour for as long as you were, do you look at that structure from the time you're on tour of having kind of this is what I do month in and month out, more favorably now than you did at the time, or is it sort of same?
If I'm really honest, that's probably why I left the tour, because it was structured, and right. I wanted to be unstructured. My first year, sort of that 2016 year where I had half a year off, I would pretty much tell people, hey, I'm either going to be there or I'm not. Don't get disappointed if I'm not there, just because I was so unstructured. But it is tough in that free surf world, where it's like you've got to just chase a swell, and also trying to figure out where you fit in the world and what style of surfing you want to do. Like guys that are chasing big waves and stuff like that, they just drop on the penny and just go. And I admire that. I think it's really cool. But yeah, I sort of it's hard. I like the structure, but I don't.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, because you retired from full-time competition. You mentioned you had the half year in 2016. Last full season was 2017. Few CT wildcards and events after that. And in your 15 plus years on tour, the majority of those years were occupied the last remaining era before the absolute dominance of the Brazilian Storm. Of the 8 men's world titles that have been claimed in the last 8 years, 6 have been claimed by Brazilians. Gabe has 3, Adriano has 1, Italo has 1, and Felipe is the reigning world champion. However, Australian male surfers in the modern era are making some inroads to the top. You got Jack Robinson's the current rankings leader, then the unsponsored Callum Robson, owner of the only Perfect 10 so far in 2023, Ethan Ewing, and certainly, Ryan Callanan, because we appreciate goofy footers on this podcast. But my question, it's been 10 years since an Australian male won the world title, that being you in 2013, after decades of dominance. So why is that? And then a sub-question with regards to that crop that we just named a moment ago. Is there someone in the list at the moment that you feel has a legitimate shot at the world title?
Yeah, look, it's hard. I guess, there's only one winner each and every year. And when you've got 3 of the most incredible surfers that we've ever seen, they all come out of the same country in Brazil. Like that's just a phenomenon. And they're all so driven. That's the other thing. So that's been tough. But Australia does go through little bits of ebbs and flows. I think before I won my first world title, Occy won his in, I think, 99.
99, yeah.
Yeah, so that was 8 years as well. So we do have these big old gaps. I wish they would close, and it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be so far between celebrations and drinks. But we've been close. Julian got a second, and so look, I think guys that are on tour today, arguably, I think Jack is the most confident and believing in himself kid on tour right now. His belief in himself, and I was just talking about it the other day, and I think throughout his years of just free surfing, he would sit at a place like Chopu and just wait an hour or so for that one wave, and he would have to be so clutch to ride it. And I think he's taken that into the competition area now, and that's why he's just so clutch. He believes he can do it. He believes that he can go and, if he needs an 8, he's like, all right, this is what I need to do an 8, and that's what he does. So I think his belief is the strongest on tour right now, and then. And he's improving day in, day out. He's willing to learn. He's willing to go and, really listen and try and get better in each and every asset of his tour life. So that's really inspiring, I think, for the other kids coming out of Australia. And then you got Ethan Ewing, who I think is in everyone's top 5 favorite surfers in the world. And so if he finds that belief, then there's another really, really dangerous title contender there. I believe that anything can happen on the day, especially now it's a one-day thing. So I just hope that it comes down to those guys, and they, everything happens for one of them come finals day.
It's interesting, your note about, obviously, like at the end of the day, there could be, 50 of the best surfers on the planet, but it's only one surfer that becomes world champion. And yeah, maybe there is kind of this cycle of 5 to 10 years. You kind of see it actually generationally in terms of talent, not just in countries, but it's like, you and your contemporaries came in, and then it was like another 10 years before the next batch came in. And you mentioned Julian Wilson. He was runner-up in the world. Another contender around his age range was someone like Owen Wright, who won a bunch of CTs and was in the race a bunch of years as well. Owen obviously very well, being Rip Curl teammates, and he just announced his retirement from full-time competition and from surfing really heavy waves of consequence in the last couple of weeks. He's going to have a wild card at this year's Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. What were your thoughts upon hearing about Owen's retirement from competition?
Um, yeah, look, I know he's got the drive to keep going. Um, but
Mm,
yeah, when it comes to health,
mm,
and the more that we're learning about brain injuries and all that sort of stuff now, I think it's a really smart decision. I guess for me, I followed a lot of NRL rugby league over here, and there's been a few guys that have been ruled out due to too many concussions, and it's
right.
really sad to see a career cut short by that. But in saying that, your health does come first. I feel like Owen, when he first came on tour, he was a phenomenon. He
Mm,
was a kid that could do everything. He could do airs. He could ride big tubes. He was not scared, and he can paddle better than anyone on earth. Those big osprey wings he's got. Um, but yeah, it's sad to see, but I'm really happy for him. I think he sort of struggled in those last couple of years, surfing wise, and just wasn't getting the results that he wanted, and I could see that eating him up a fair bit.
mm,
And then there was that. Oh, there's always that thing hanging over your head. Am I too old? Have I lost it, or anything
mm.
like that? And I think now to come in and give it one last almighty crack to go and win bells and say his goodbyes at the same time. The times I've seen him just recently, he's felt he looks content. He looks light. He
Mm.
looks happy, and that's all you want for a mate.
I mean, he's had an incredible career, and this, like, we had Julian on the podcast about this time last year, I think, but like similar conversation where on paper you look at Julian's achievements or Owen's achievements, and multiple CT wins, like top 5 finishes, triple crowns ad nauseum, like very, very successful careers. But with both of them, and I'm going to bring this back to what we talked about with your wild card as well, there's kind of the surfing industrial complex hype machine when everyone's young, where it's like this person has to win a world title, and if they don't, everyone kind of gets the knives out for them, and they miss kind of the forest from the trees in the sense of like this person put in a decade or 15 years of world class surfing and achieved all these things, and it should be celebrated. And just because they didn't reach the upper echelon of world title doesn't mean it was a failure. But you were probably in a really similar position in the mid to late 90s with a ton of hype coming up around you. And as you said, it took you a few years on tour before you won your first world title. Did the pressure and the hype and kind of the expectations that everyone put on you as a young person, did that play into your performances in the early years, or was it something that you were even aware about?
No. I think I just messed up a lot of times. I felt like I just felt like I was having fun. I was young and sort of I almost took it for granted how quick we got to that top 5. And so we hadn't up until that point we hadn't really been challenged, and it was funny. It was like I remember I've said this before in an interview, but there was a quote that Andy came and they were talking about Parker and myself and this and that, and they're like, oh, when do you think we're gonna start beating Andy? And he's like, when they get consistent. And people were like, oh, that's heavy. Like, are you gonna take that? And I was like, well, it's true. We weren't consistent. We weren't dedicated enough to become the best at that point because we were so young and immature. And for me, it took an injury to sit back and go, "Hey, I almost lost everything," to really put my head down and really give it everything that I got. So when you're young, it's, everything's fresh, everything's fun, and you make a lot of stupid mistakes in the water, and how to compete and all that sort of stuff. And I think in the media, they want a new headline, they want something new to talk about, but most of the time, the guys that are in the top of the ratings, they're there for a reason, because they've worked out the system, they've worked out the game, and that's why they're the best. So yeah, I think when we put too much hype on a young kid, and it sort of distracts from their actual talent, and you've got to give them room to grow, room to learn, and then if they're not doing it after, say, five 5 to 8 years, I think that's when you can start being a little bit more critical and go, why isn't that happening? But I think in those early years, it's a big learning curve to go from the QS or juniors into the CT, because these guys and girls are the absolute top of the echelon.
Makes a ton of sense. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. In 2020, you became a father. Your son, Xander Dean. Obviously, an interesting time, like, to start a family. Not that you planned it, but during a pandemic. But in a few words, how would you describe the experience of fatherhood and that happening at that time in your life?
It's magical. To be really honest, and I thought it was the best time ever to have a family, especially for Bree, like, being pregnant. No one was going out. She didn't have FOMO of her friends doing all these fun things, and we got to just sit at home and just really get to know each other. I got to sit there, and I was involved in everything. I was involved in watching her grow. What decisions of how she wanted to do the birth and all that kind of stuff. And then when Xander did come into the world, I had nowhere to go, and I didn't want to go anywhere. If I had to get on a plane, I would have missed my plane for sure. Um, you know, for the first week, I had to force myself just to go and jump in the water to go for a quick surf, because I didn't want to leave. It was just incredible. And yeah, I reckon everyone should go into a 2-year bubble when they have a kid. It's amazing.
It's interesting to hear that, though, because it makes all the sense in the world. But you obviously had even probably one of your closest friends, Joel Parkinson, who did it the other way. You had his kids he had very young, and was a father while competing on tour, while battling for world titles, and you had kind of a front row seat to that. While you were on tour, it wasn't anything you ever thought about doing, or was it just the opportunity wasn't there?
Look, you think about doing it, and you think about, oh, it'd be great to have a kid, and I remember telling Joel, mate, I do not know how you did this on tour and still competed. Like, I always had a lot of respect for Joel, but and anyone that had a family on tour, like, to do that, to do family life and then tour life as well, hats off to you, because you're an absolute warrior. It's yeah, it's a full-time job, and as athletes, we're selfish. We just want, it's all about me, 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 I. And then as soon as the family comes in, you're the last one to get fed. You're the last one to sit at the table. You're the last one to go to bed. And you're the last one to make a decision on where we're going. So, um, so yeah, huge hats off to those guys. And I don't know if I would have been able to compete the way I did, or even close to what those guys did on tour, because yeah, and hats off to the wives as well. Like, like going
Mm.
through all that is just incredible. Like so much respect.
Yeah. It's sort of like a pet topic of conversation recently on the podcast, but is just the idea that specifically with a lot of the surfers we talk to, and certainly the world's best surfers, you can almost look at every single one of our world champions and identify like they came from challenging upbringings, broken homes, low income, adversity. And it obviously like it creates a situation where you go, okay, well, the ocean becomes kind of a surrogate family member. I'm going to spend a lot of time there. And by virtue of that, I got very good at this thing in the ocean. And also I had this drive that came out of my upbringing. And, recently we had fellow Yeti ambassador Shane Dorian on the podcast, and we were talking about all sorts of things, and he got around to talking about his son Jackson, who's obviously a very good surfer. And I asked him, I said, you came up from a more challenging upbringing than your son is just by virtue of your success, Shane. Do you ever think about that? And he goes, it is the only thing I think about. And I have to kind of intentionally manufacture adversity for Jackson, or at least remind him of how lucky he has it so he doesn't fall into that trap. And obviously Xander's still young, but now that you're a father, do you think about those things? Just the balance of like, I want to give my son everything, but at the same time, I know giving them everything is not going to be good for them in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's such I think in Shane's world, it's probably a really fine line where he wants to give his family absolutely everything, because that's why he works so hard. That's why I go to work, is because I want to be able
Sure.
to make sure that my family's okay when I'm not working. And
Right.
but in that same sentence, you don't want to hand everything over. And
Mm.
I think yeah, it's probably I've got to do a lot of learning around like how to be firm but just and all that sort of stuff. Maybe we'll just do some boot camps or something like that and make him walk, to the beach or
Sign
something
me
like
up.
that.
I
But
need, yeah. Right.
yeah, but yeah, it's a really it's a tough one. I'm going through what they call the terrible twos right now, and it's like, what battles do you pick? What battles do you want to have a tantrum over, and what battles do you want to just get on with it? So I guess that just keeps evolving and evolving. But I I would like for my son to go out and whatever he chooses to do, be determined and give it his best, and not feel like he has a fallback net. Obviously, we'll always be there
Mm.
to support, but yeah, I'd love to see him go and just become his own person and learn. He's going to make mistakes, as we all do, and I'm just going to support. I say this now until I become a soccer dad, but yeah, I try
Right.
and
That's right.
support from the sideline. I don't want to be in his face, because I want him to go and experience all the cool things that I got to experience. Traveling by myself, or learning business, or
Mm.
learning how to be better in this world. So yeah, it's a really tough one, but. Yeah, I'll probably be ringing Shano and asking him for some advice, and obviously Parko as well. So yeah, it's just yeah. I guess that's lucky for us too, that we got to create a life.
Mm.
Got to create a life out of surfing, and to be able to provide. Um, and create a comfortable life for ourselves through surfing.
Mm.
Like I count my blessings every day, and I'll tell Xander those stories for sure.
Mm. On the topic of work, I guess it's 2019. I want to say it's yesterday, but we're all hurtling towards the crucible. It's 2023. But in 2019, you signed a 10-year lifetime deal with Rip Curl, a partner that you've been with for multiple decades at this point. And at the time, Neil Ridgway, who was operating as the Rip Curl's group marketing chairman, said, Mick isn't just a world champion surfer. He is the most important surfer in the history of our company, which is big raps. And we know that, and he feels it too. So we decided to lock the deal down for life. Basically, you don't walk away from a relationship like that, especially when it's still working and it's good fun. Anywhere he goes, we go. He is influential both inside and outside of surfing. He is the gold to the brand. He is one of us. Huge, worthy compliment in a lot of ways, but in terms of secure, I mean, in every way, excuse me, I don't mean temperate, but really like for someone like yourself, having worked so hard and so long and having retired from full-time competition, to have that support from a primary sponsor within that context in terms of security for your future, it must have felt pretty special.
Yeah, it's a really good, I guess, reward. And um, and thank you, I guess, from trying to work so hard. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, it's when you know that you've got that security for 10 years, is really nice. You can sort of take the foot off the pedal if you wanted to. Um, and yeah, but it's strange too. Like, I remember doing that deal with Neil, and we were talking about it, and we are both very, very honest with each other. Um, and like, and one of our lines was, I don't know if I'm going to be, still doing the search in 2 years, or I don't know if I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. And he's like, my thoughts exactly, but let's just figure it out as we go, and just keep an honest relationship going. Like, there might be a day where I ring and just go, hey, I'm not working today, or I'm not working this year. And he was totally down with that. And I think that was, I'm sure he wants me to work every day, but but yeah, that was sort of it was just a really honest conversation. And I was really thankful for that situation, for sure. And you know what, that deal still evolves today. Things change each and every year, and there's a lot of toing
Mm.
and froing, and yeah, at this stage, I still am excited to go around and chase new waves on the search. So yeah, I'm really happy that I get to go and do that still for my job.
It's interesting too, getting to talk to someone like yourself, because this came up recently with Stephanie Gilmore as well, where she was saying, when you're young, and you're just becoming, acknowledged for your talent, and you're getting sponsored, you might have agency, but you might not realize it. And even if you do, you're hesitant to apply it in terms of how you're positioned and marketed and treated. And she goes, as you get older, you realize that all these parts have kind of created a public facing brand for yourself. And that agency becomes a weapon you can wield, in terms of dictating what those deals look like, dictating or not dictating is maybe not the right word, but just taking charge of how you're being utilized and how you're being expressed, and also who you want to work with. And I think if you look across a lot of your relationships, I believe, your deal with Creatures of Leisure is part ownership now as well. And you've recently, not recently, but in the last few years, partnered with Yeti, which it feels like that's an ideal kind of situation for you, because it's not just surfing, it's a lot of these other things you're interested in. As far as the Yeti relationship goes, how did that relationship come about?
Yeah, it was funny. That one was sort of I obviously, as the product started coming more accessible and stuff like that, I asked one of the guys here in Australia, do you mind if I just get like a couple of things from Yeti? And they just sent me a bunch of stuff, um, and then I kept talking to them, and you know, didn't they're such a cool company. Like they'll give you product and but don't ask anything for it. They're just like, we want to just grow organically and stuff like that. And then I got a call from Glenn Casey, who's one of the Yeti guys here in Australia, and he's like, would you consider being on the, you know, being an ambassador? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. I use the stuff every day anyway. So, and from there, it just sort of just grew organically. It's
Mm.
there, as you said, like, yeah, it's stuff that I use each and every day. I use a water bottle all day, every day. You use coffee mugs. Now I've got a family. I'm taking the blankets down the beach, coolers, like bags, like everything. It's a thing where you just um, yeah, it just makes life easier for me. And so when you have products like that, especially for me, like you're talking as you're turning yourself almost into a brand, it's such an
Mm.
easy story to tell if you're using that product each and every day. It's not a lie.
Mm.
It's just, okay, here's my water bottle. It's in, you know, you can see me walking down the street with it all the time, or
Right.
it's in my car. So those sort of things are just, yeah, they just become part of your brand, so to say. And with a company that makes, you know, I guess talking about brands and how you want to make yourself a brand or whatever. I always built myself around performance, and I want to use the best products
Mm.
possibly out there. And that's why I'm aligned with the companies that I am aligned with, because I feel like they make the best products out there. So, yeah, I guess some of them come organically like that. Other ones, I'm sort of looking out the window going, God, that would be really cool to have that. Maybe I'll give them a call.
I feel like there could have been a liminal space opportunity for Yeti where they're just slipping a bunch of stickers into the cooler and being like, if he gets a ding on his board, maybe he'll take one and just put it on there and then we don't have to. But
That's the
that
beauty
makes
of
all the
it.
sense in the world.
That's the beauty of
Yeah.
it. Like when I signed my contract, I'm like, do you want me to put a sticker on my board or not? And they're like, it's totally up to you. It's totally up to you. And I was like, you know, that's really nice from a company. It's like there's no like, it's like, all right, here's the deal that we're thinking. This is the stuff that we want to achieve throughout a year, and can you help us with this or that? And it's a relationship in a sense. There's no like dictatorship.
Mm. You mentioned before the idea of learning new things about performance, learning new things about business, and in terms of business, we mentioned up at the intro, you probably the gold standard at the moment for what a successful post-competitive surfing career could look like. One of the elements to that is the fact that you are a business owner. You started Balter Breweries in 2016 with Joel Parkinson and Bede Durbridge and Josh Kerr and a few others. That sold in 2019. You launched MF Softboards in 2017. Those are in and around, your final years on tour. How long had you been kind of looking at, maybe I'm going to go into business instead of maybe just sit on my laurels or just be a free surfer or whatever, like it obviously it was a calculated decision because it happened before the end of your competitive career. I'm curious as to how far back you started thinking about these things.
Yeah, I think it's very calculated. You can't ever determine what the outcome of these companies are going to be. You've sort of just got to swing the bat and hopefully you hit a home run. And there's been a lot of balls that have come through that I've missed. But I think probably like the first conversations that retirement started popping into my head was probably around 2013. Um,
Hmm.
what does life after tour look like, and how am I how am I going to set myself up so I'm I make the decisions if I go to work or not. So
Mm.
it was very conscious. And I think as you get older, you work out the tour, and you're not so like, I just have to wholly concentrate on just being involved in what I'm doing to be a better performer. You start looking at
Mm.
other things to try and occupy your mind, and business was one that I sort of, just um, it's sort of, I always enjoyed the product R&D side of things, and always like trying to come up with plans, and like working with people that have a similar outlook on what I have, and that's how it sort of just came about. Am I Do I always make the right decisions? No, but I've been lucky enough to fall in with people that have been in that business world and made really substantial, I guess, business decisions, and they've been my mentors in a sense. I speak about a guy called David Gingell, who I sat on the board of Bolter with, and
Mm.
I was just blown away how good he was at reading numbers and making
Mm.
decisions, and just looking at things so objectively, even though he's working with friends and stuff like that. And then I got another guy, Ant McDonald, who is CEO of Bolter. I always just love that he's the way he's a leader is he goes, and if he doesn't know anything, he'll go and learn it and try it,
Mm.
and and make sure that he knows everything about it before he tells someone else to do something. And they're the sort of people that I look to, and they're the sort of people that inspire me to be better at this business side of the world. But it's I guess just having good people in your corner and good sounding boards is a big thing in business. It's the same as I guess it's the
It's
same in
interesting to hear you. Oh,
sorry,
no, no, go.
it's the same. We have
Mm.
coaches, um, we have our buddies that we bounce ideas off. And so, it's just the same sort of concept, but in a business world, and you're dealing with money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to say it's interesting to hear you say, 2013 was kind of the year I was thinking of what does life look like after competitive surfing, and you and I worked pretty closely together when I was on tour. You won your first world title in 2007, second one 2009, third one in 2013. I am curious, just having had to sit pretty close to you in a lot of working situations at the time. Did you prefer being the reigning world champion on tour? And by that, I mean, in 2010, you're the reigning world champion at the start of the season. You have to go to every press conference, every conversation's about defending the world title, et cetera, et cetera. Or did you prefer the years where you didn't have to deal with that and you could just focus on your surfing?
I had to deal with it the whole career. uh, I think I was the only one who ever showed up to press conferences. Um, it, Look, I guess the years that you were chasing a world title, was they're the years that you sort of really buckle down. The years that you're defending a world title, was probably a little bit different because you put a little bit more pressure on yourself. Um,
Mm.
and but essentially, it's similar in the fact that you still got to work. Like as soon as you become a world champion, it's like those lazy days of not doing interviews and all that sort of stuff. That's out the window. It's like
Mm. Right.
you've got to go, and you've got to, like, even if it's good or bad, you've got to answer the media and do all that sort of stuff. There were days where I
Mm.
just didn't want to be there, but um, it's like, hey, it's it's better in the long run to be there, because one, you don't have to go and apologize to everyone for not being there for just an hour out of your time or something like that. But yeah, I don't know, my brain has always got a million things going on anyway. So it was just part of it.
I'm not going to ask you too much about your relationship with Darren Hanley, because I think if people want to check it out, you spoke really beautifully about it in a few places. But like Stab in the Dark series you did a few years ago, and even the electric acid surfboard test you did with them, I'd recommend all our listeners check those out. They're really, really cool. But I am going to ask you about where you're at in terms of board designs for yourself, particularly these days, in terms of how much creative freedom you allow yourself in your own surfing. Are the boards you're riding radically different than the ones you were riding when you were competing for world titles?
Yes and no. When the waves are really good and perfect, I just go back to the tour boards. And so yeah, I'm always, getting that feeling again. Like when the waves are good, you want to be on. It's more the fact when the waves are small, like as we were talking earlier, your body gets old and you can't move as well as you used to. So I'm trying to figure out new ways to enjoy small wave surfing. And so boards are really different to what I used to ride on tour. I wish I had some of the boards that I have now on tour. That would have made some places so much more enjoyable. But yeah,
Right.
I sort of I'll get fixated on a twin fin, or I get fixated on like at the moment I'm riding like a 5/8 diamond tail with a wide nose, and I just can't get off it. But I in the background where Darren and I are still talking and looking at the team and trying to figure out new ways to improve their situation, so they don't have to do all the R&D. Like I'll go and try a heap of different boards and say, hey, I felt this, maybe try that with that person. And so they don't have to get over all the speed bumps until, the boards are more closer to production level when they get to have a go of it. And so they don't have to waste their time with the ones that don't work so well. So that's sort of where my life is trying to make small waves way more fun, and then trying to help the performance side of it feel better and take out a lot of guesswork for Darren's athletes.
It's interesting too, because I'd imagine, and this is sort of an educated guess, that you're quite the secret weapon in terms of recruitment for Darren Hanley. And my proof case on this is we talked to Connor O'Leary a while back, and he had just switched from Channel Islands, and he was testing out some boards. He's like, well, I was testing some boards out, and I had a DH, and Mick Fanning was like, man, that's the best I've seen you surf in a long time, and it's fucking Mick Fanning, and so like I'm riding DHs now, and I'm like, man, I would too, like, but not every board company has that, and like interestingly enough, we're running the Vissla CT Shaper rankings program this year, where we're calculating performance based on who's riding what. We're counting quarterfinals or better. And, DH is sitting third on the rankings right now. Sharp Eyes up front, Mayhem's in second, DH is in third. Doing very well. He's got obviously Molly Picklum. He's getting some results from Connor O'Leary. I saw Callum Robson had a few down at Bell's. Steph Gilmore, of course. So it's a strong team, and having you in that corner's probably hugely advantageous to him. I'm curious about when you were on tour and winning as much as you did, if you noticed other competitors kind of gravitating towards, maybe I'll try a DH because Fanning's doing well. Because I think you can make a pretty strong case that that's what's happening with Marcio Zovi and Brendan Leckie and Sharp Eye at the moment. Like they have this massive team. Like anytime someone seems to fall off a shaper, someone goes on there. Like they just signed Seth Moniz. And I'm so curious because all these board builders are creating, world-class level equipment, but yet there's kind of one brand that's sort of sucking up so much attention from some of the CT surfers. Have you noticed that this season? And if so, was it similar when you were on tour?
No, that thing's been happening forever. It was, yeah, it was funny. I guess, you know, back in the day, you'd start off with your equipment that you worked on over the preseason and all that sort of stuff. But then once you start getting towards the end of the year, or you get to a place like Europe, then the Euro shapers would come into it, and you'd start, like, I'd go in and
Mm.
just start pestering everyone in Belly's factory and going, "Hey Christian, do you reckon you could make me a board? I saw someone absolutely ripping on one of yours," and then Simon was working in that factory, and Simon would be like, "Hey, I've got an idea for you," and I'm like, "Yep, quick, do it, let's do it." And I would pester them to try and get new boards. Probably one of the one of the big factors for me even trying out a Mayhem back in the day was Brett Simpson in New York, and just seeing him flying along the little waves, and I was like, that's what I need right now in my life. And so I
Mm.
went and pestered Mayhem, and I think people see other people going really, really good on them, and they're like, hey, maybe there's something in that. And they might picture a surfer, like you think about Sharp Eye. He's been around for a long time. I remember Benny Bourgeois used to get them, and
Totally.
people would try them, but I think he's just found a magic formula. And you know, my instance, I stole one of. I broke my board out Debo one day, and I saw Billy Stammen on the beach, and the waves were pumping, and I was like, "Can I just borrow a board, just because I only took one down to the beach, and can I just borrow your board for a couple of waves?" And it was a Sharp Eye, and even though the thing was way too small for me, I felt something in his concaves and stuff like that, and I went straight to DH. I was like, "Mate, you've got to have a look at this," because I felt something that was so different. And that's how it works. That's,
Mm.
they're shapers are stealing off everyone else, and it's just this full circle. And remember when growing up, everyone was on CIs. You had Kelly, you had Taylor Knox, you
Mm.
had Rob Machado, three of the greatest surfers of all time, and they're all on CIs. So everyone went down that route, and then it just changes. Like, someone will just hit a hot
Right.
period, and it'll be like, all right, I'm on, and everyone wants it. Someone will just have a breakout performance and just be like, um, I need that board. Um, so yeah, it does go hot and cold for shapers, and there are good and bads. There were times with DH I was like, mate, if you don't change something, I've got to get off these things, and it sort of lights a fire under his bum, um, and but yeah, you're always looking for that next best thing, especially in surfboards. And I think that's why so many people have gravitated to Sharp Eyes at the moment. Is, obviously Philippe was flying along. And then, we saw Kanoa go up an extra few gears. And now Jack's gone,
Mm.
you know, went from barely qualifying to number one in the world. Like, there's something to say there for those shapers.
Makes a ton of sense. We've got one more segment to go, but first we're going to take one more break to get a word in from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. So when today's episode airs, it's going to be essentially the opening day of the window for the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. It's celebrating its 60th year of an event. It's one of the longest running in professional surfing history. It's obviously a venue that's played a huge role in your arc and your story. For listeners who have never been there, how would you describe the place and the wave and what makes it so special?
Um, yeah, it's a really different event. It's an event that's off. it's sort of almost off-site from the towns. Most places are in the town. Um, excuse me. And you drive through the bush, and then you drive down the hills, and you can start seeing the basin of the bowl and Winky, and once you pull up, it's got a real aura about it. It's something that I don't know. You can feel the history. I can anyway. And it's not like a Times Square or something where the excitement's just like through the roof. It's a powerful sort of calm energy, and I feel like that energy sort of just everyone's there. It's a gathering, and it's I don't know. It feels like people get more connected there than what they do at other events, because you're all out there and you're all in this little zone together. And then on top of that, having that Colosseum style effect from the cliffs and the grandstands and stuff like that. We don't really get that at any other venue on tour.
So this year's Bells Beach event is the fourth of the first 5 stops on the championship tour. It's the penultimate stop before mid-season relegation, which wasn't something that was on tour when you were competing. But heading into Bells, currently below the cut line on the men's side, you've got Kanoa Igarashi, Kelly Slater, Baron Mamiya, Jake Marshall, Jackson Baker, Michael Rodriguez, Carlos Munoz, Kolohe Andino, Maxime Husino, Zeke Lau, and then the injured Jadson Andre and Ramsey Bukiam. And then on the women's side, below the cut line, you have Sally Fitzgibbons, Courtney Conlog, Lakey Peterson, Steph Gilmore, Isabella Nichols, Sophie McCulloch, Teresa Bonvalot, and then the injured Joanne Defay. Again, the relegation is not something that you had to deal with as a competitor, but you did have to deal with pressure. And so if you were coaching or advising or just talking to any of these surfers that might have that pressure heading into Bells Beach, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a tough one being in that situation. I would be like, don't hope to go in and secure your spot. Go out and do it. Create your own destiny. Create your own, I guess, create your own history in a sense, and say, I'm going to take this. It's the same way as you go out and win a world title. It's like, I'm going to go and do it. Because if you sit there and hope, it's only going to get you so far. It might get you through a heat or two, but that's when you lock up. Where if you go out and attack, at least you can, either way it goes, you can put your head on the pillow at night and say, hey, I just gave it my all and it just wasn't good enough. Or I gave it my all and look where I am now. I'm still on tour and ready to make up for lost time.
Would you ever accept another wild card into a championship tour event? And if so, where?
I think we've spoken about this many a time. You know what? Probably not now, no. I felt like I did Bells last year, and I paddled out, and I really questioned why I was out there. I questioned, I feel like I'm happier sitting on the beach and enjoying the people who are the best do their thing. So I don't think I would now. I'm content. I answered all the questions that I wanted to answer.
You can, every time you come back on the podcast, I'm going to ask you the same question because I'm a convert. So it would be like, Mick's on for the 14th time. It's 2045. I'm like, so if we gave you a wild card at J-Bay, are you going to? Second question, last question I'll ask before we get to the Instagram community is, you were announced broadly to the world in one of the major ways via Matty Jai's 3 Degrees, which chronicled basically the arrival of yourself, Joel Parkinson, Dean Morrison, and some of your colleagues. Would you, Dean, and Joel ever come back to do maybe a 3 Degrees sequel video in the future?
333 degrees. It's funny you mentioned that because we have been tossing up the idea. Um, we've we've secretly been putting footage together, and yeah, it's definitely been a topic that us three old blokes have actually been talking about. So you never know. You never know.
It's breaking news on the podcast. I'm going to claim that one. We're taking the win.
There you go.
We did put out a feeler for questions for you from the exclusive, everyone. Big headline. We did put out a feeler for questions for you from the Instagram community at people who follow us at the Lineup Pod. We got a bunch, but we've whittled it down to 3. The first question is from Et Suff, who asks, what's more challenging, focusing on winning world titles or having a kid?
When you're focusing on winning world titles, you're 100% selfish. When you're having a kid, you are not selfish one bit. I probably get more reward now out of watching my son grow, which is pretty amazing. Taking him to the beach and watching him be on a surfboard or something like that. It's out of this world.
Second question is from Declan Ryan 1, who asks, do you think Penrith can three-peat?
Yeah, I always back my team. But yeah, look, I guess there's a lot of questions. I think because they've changed their team a little bit, there's probably a few little gaps, but I'm sure they'll figure it out come finals. And we'll go 3-peat.
It's a good answer. Last question, speaking of 3, is from @k.beachy, who asks, would you be willing or are you planning to participate in a heritage heat? So we've already established that I'm going to keep asking you about CT wildcards, but a little bit different. So we've got another heritage heat between Tom Curran and Mark Akalupo at this year's Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. In the future, would you be willing to participate in one?
It all depends on when Kelly gets off tour, because none of us can do a heritage heat because Kelly's still on tour and he's older than us. So yeah, maybe ask Kelly if you ever get off tour and we can we can start doing those fun heats.
You're like, I was ready 5 years ago. I don't know what to do. But anyway, well, thanks to everyone that wrote in at the Lineup Pod. We're now down to our final segment of the podcast. It's now time for the lightning round. These are 10 questions that you've answered before, but this is 3 years ago. I've got your answers here for you to answer again as quickly as you can. Mm-hmm. Sorry, what was that last part? Sorry.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. It's all good.
Lost you again at the finish line. You got me?
Hello. I can hear you.
Oh. All right, okay, I got you. Okay. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Right now, I'm riding a board that can be a twin fin, a 20 with a trailer and thruster. So that's probably my board. Your camera went dark on me there, Dave.
Oh no, I think I lost you here on the last segment. No, you're good. I might just can the lightning round because this might be hard with this delay. Just call it a day. You've answered these before. We're good to go. And so if you're still there, I'll wrap up and I'll just say, Mick Fanning, thank you so much for coming back on the lineup. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I'm excited to see what you're doing next, whether it's the 333 degrees, whatever you're doing in sort of life and business, or even the trailer for the greatest surf film in the universe, which I'm excited to watch as well. But man, been a hero of mine for a long time. I really appreciate you coming back on the podcast.
No worries. Cheers, mate.